Okay, let's start. So this is the buying process. This is the example on page 164. If you haven't done it, just follow it. If you have done it, just go on with something else. Okay, we have these things here. In your test, one of these two is going to be missing. Okay, so you need to find the questions that only have 3 parts. So we've got the manufacturer, they mark it up, GST's applied. Okay, we all know GST. On goods and services taxes, there's 10% on everything. A goods could be that book you've bought, a service could be getting your car serviced, a goods and a service. The wholesaler buys it from them, they mark it up, a GST is applied. But this guy has already paid some GST. So this guy claims that GST back as a tax input credit. Now that term's really important. You need to know how much tax input credits there are. The retailer is where you buy your clothes from, is a retailer. They mark it up, a GST is applied, but because this guy has already paid some GST, they get that back as a tax input credit. Because you can't charge a tax on a tax, you can't mark up a tax. Okay, and then you, effectively, when we see it, you'll pay all the GSTs. Now let's have a look. This is the manufacturer's cost, $200. Now, I'm just going to set it up here so you can see everything. M for manufacturer. They're marking it up 20%. Now you have to know that 20% is 0.2. All right, so it's 0.2 of 200, which is $40. So there's the manufacturer. It costs you $200 to make it. You add the $40. So you're going to try and sell it for $240. But that's not the end of it, is it? Because you haven't paid GST on it. Okay? You're selling someone a good. So you've got to charge them 10% GST. So this is where this comes in. So the GST, 0.1, which is 10%, of, which is times, is $24. Now suddenly, that adds up to $264. Okay? And that is the 240, which is the wholesaler's. That's what the wholesaler has to pay, cost price. The wholesaler's cost price is $240. But someone's got to pay the $24 GST. Okay? So for the wholesaler, for them to buy it, they've got to pay $264. But this 24 goes to the government. Is that all right? Chloe, you do know this one, don't you? Yeah. Yep. Michaela, you know this one? All right, now let's have a look. Now that's called GST inclusive. Now we've got the wholesaler. You can't mark up that $24. All right? We can't mark it up because it's a tax. We can only mark up the $240. Does that make sense? So when we look at the next bit, the markup is 25%, which is 0.25. 0.25, lots of the 240. So this 264, even though he may have paid for it, or the wholesaler has paid that much money for it, you can't mark up the 24 because that's a tax, and that tax has got to go to the government. So you can only mark up the 240. Now that's really important. That number doesn't transfer from here, the manufacturer, to the wholesaler. Only this number, the 240, transfers. That's starting to make some sense? If it doesn't, just yell out.
In the top line, the manufacturer line,
yeah.
How do we get 24?
Because
wait, can you just go back to the slide?
This one here, the manufacturer charges a markup of 20%. Now the 20% is $40, right? Mm-hmm. So 20% is a fifth of 200 is 40. So that's $240. So the manufacturer is making it for $200 and wants $40 profit. But when he sells it, he's selling a good, and he has to charge a tax of 10% on that, because the government require him to mark it up by 10%, and he needs to send the government $24. Yeah, and that's where the $24 comes from. Now he's not paying that out of his own pocket. So when he sells it to the wholesaler, he said, you can have it for $264, but he only pockets $240. $24 goes to the government.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Now this guy here, he's putting his markup on it, but he can't mark up that $24. Do you understand markup? He's putting a profit on it.
Yeah.
He can't mark up that $24 because that's a tax. So you can't make a profit on a tax. Yep?
Yeah.
So when he puts his markup on it, which is 25%, now these numbers just come out of the example, right? That's a quarter of that. Now a quarter of that's $60. Okay? So when he adds that together, that gives him $300. 240 plus 60 is 300. So that gives him his $300. So that's where the 300 comes from. Now, he's going to sell it to a retailer. Now, before he sells it, he's selling someone a good, and he has to put GST on it. So he has to put GST 0.1 of 300. A tenth of that, just move the decimal place back one hop, is $30.
So 0.1 is 10%.
0.1 is 10%. So over here, 10%, 10 per 100, cancel,
Yeah.
cancel, 1/10, 0.1.
Okay.
Okay? So that's the $30. So when he sells it to the retailer, he charges the retailer, now we're into the retailer, the $30 plus the $300, which is $330. That's okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, and that is GST inclusive. So we've got the manufacturer, the wholesaler, and now the retailer. Now the retailer has to make a profit. So the retailer, oh, have I gone too far? Okay, the retailer has to make a profit. Now, I'm just going to, the next one just talks about these taxes, so I'll just go back and show you what the taxes are. Okay, let's have a look. Now, we're talking about input tax credits, so we're not quite where we need to go. It says the wholesaler has to pay $30 GST, but the retailer has already paid $24. So here's the wholesaler's $30. But the retailer has paid this $24 to the government. Now the government don't need that money twice, it's already been paid. So this person gets a tax input credit of $24. So 30 take 24 is $6. Because the tax is $30 and 24 is being paid, this person, the wholesaler, only has to find $6. Does that start to make sense?
A little bit.
Okay, well, when we do it again, you'll get to see a little bit more there. Okay, next one. So here we got the retailer. When the retailer gets it, he's got to pay $330, that's GST included. So basically this $30, which is made up of this guy's $6 and this guy's $24, has been paid. Now you can't mark up that $30. So his markup is 30%. So his markup is 30%, which is so his mark up is 30%, which is 0.3 of the 300. It's this number here. It's that number there. It's that number there. It's not the 330, because you're not allowed to mark up the $30 tax. Okay, now 0.3 times that, 3 times 3 is 9, with an extra naught in the answer, that's $90. No, that's not right, is it? Yep, $90, there we go. Sorry, I was thinking that's his tax. So that's $90. You happy with that? So he's making, this person, I'm just saying he, just assuming it's a he. This person, the retailer, is making 30% profit. So they've spent $300, they're making 30% profit on that, so they're making $90 profit. Now, when they sell it, they've got to charge GST. So the GST is 0.1 of those two added together, $3.90. Okay, and a tenth of that is $39. Now, the $3.90, because that's the markup, 300 plus 90. Okay, over here, the 300 plus the 90 is the 390. 10% of that is $39. Add them all together. 390 plus 39 is $429. Okay, so that's the retailer. The retailer has put a markup on it, and then because the retailer is selling a good and they're actually providing a service as well, the tax is another 10%. But what's happened is, this guy has effectively paid $30. Okay? So someone else has paid the $30 out of the $39. So this guy owes the tax, tax office, the $39 minus the tax input credit, which is $30. So this guy owes $9. That's the tax they have to pay, because the tax input credit is $30 because it's already been paid. Now, who pays this $429?
Customer?
The customer. Excellent. So the customer has to pay pays $429. Okay? Now, let's have a look. The customer pays the $429. Now, that $429 includes $39 GST. Here's the $39 on the final, this is the final price. The markup has made it up to $3.90 and the GST on it is $39. Now, where does that $39 come from? Well, basically, you're the customer, I'm the customer, we're paying it. And so, but the manufacturer had to put in $24 to the government. The wholesaler had to put in $6 to the government because they had to pay $30 and their tax input credit was $24 from the time before. This guy had to pay $9 because his GST was $39, but the guy before had paid $30. But look at it. 29 plus 6 plus 9, that's 30, that's 39. What's the customer's GST? 39. So in effect, the customer pays for everything. The customer pays that GST. Okay? But the trick is when you do the calculations, this stuff here, I put on the outside. In the book, they put it on the inside and they write a little blurb about it. But I just prefer to keep it well away. So effectively, we pay the GST. And the important bits are when you answer the questions after you've done this. So as soon as you see a question like this, you just go through all these steps. You need to know what the tax input credit is and how much the wholesaler pays. What the tax input credit is for the retailer and how much the retailer pays. Now remember, in the test, one of these steps will be missing because I don't need you to do it time and time again. Is that okay? Is everyone okay with this one? Because I tell you what, when you do these answers, normally half the class make a mistake. They get them the wrong way round. They get the GST paid and the tax input credit the wrong way. So if you set it out like this, they should be okay.